them to you as we go through the question and answer, okay? But before the question and answer section, I invite Mr. Wolfgang to tell us what he knows about the Kosovo National School of Public Administration. Wolfgang Drechsler is Professor of Governance at TalTech's Department, sorry for the name, of University College London in the Institute of Innovation and Public Purpose. Adjunct Professor of Universitas Indonesia at the Faculty of Administrative Science and Associate at Harvard University Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies. Wolfgang, please, the floor is yours.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, a few remarks about the genesis of the school that we're discussing, and why this task has fallen to me is because on a consultative basis I was involved in this project from a very early stage, before the current one, and the entire set of what the schools of public administration, inner training and education and consultancy purposes should be doing. That's something that I've been interested in and involved in for 3 decades at least. And one of the things that we use for benchmarking is the calibration of these schools in Germany after unification of the internals of the faculty, which in the German Science Council under the President of the Federal Republic I was actually in charge of. So at this time, which is very long ago, I actually don't want to think about how long it makes me very old. This is, in my opinion, one of the almost like a model process here in Kosovo. That means the way how the idea to create a new school of administration as it's going is really the best practice, or shall we say, as we now fashionably say, good practice, because we don't want to use the word best practice anymore. This is a really good practice of how you do this, and it's one of these, if you will, positive case studies. Because the thing emerged out of a problem awareness in the ministry, and here in the deputy ministry in charge. That means how do you structure the education and the training of public and civil servants in conjunction with general civil service reform. That means if we want a certain type of civil servants, if we want a certain type of public employees, how do you get them on the level in which they are? And you know, of course, one of the things where not all international organizations involved in advice in Kosovo have really done a good job is an understanding that you cannot assume that what you have is already either qualitatively on high level or legitimate. Yeah? So this is always in these reform things. Do I accept what I have as something that was already the result of a good process, or do you have to say this is actually a negative legacy? So the one thing is that you look at what you want, and the other thing is what you have. And there were several institutions involved in this kind of training, and so one of the first things that you think about is, of course, can you upgrade what you have, or can you unite the institutions that you have? And what I really liked in this process is how a careful assessment of the existing institutions was done, all with papers by people from Kosovo, experts from Kosovo, who, however, were not part of these institutions, who were writing briefs, including organogram ideas, funding, and so on. This is a very, very important thing. How the money comes in, how the money goes out, what you want to have before. And this also included some site visits, including some spontaneous ones. And I was also lucky to participate in some of them. So, and something that we had in Germany, that there were, for instance, PA training institutions that were not on the map. I mean, you couldn't find them on the map. They were left out on purpose. On the other hand, there are institutions that are on the map and that have a high public profile, and then you go there and there is literally nothing there. Real ghost institutions run by 1 or 2 people, or PA training institutions that say you do the training, but all they do is to coordinate the training, but they don't have any staff and faculty. So it was very interesting to see that. Whereas, for instance, the training college for the uniformed services, I found very impressive physically. That means the built environment. And people will say, oh, this is like 70s and not so nice. And I said, oh, come on. We have a lot of Fachhochschulen in Germany which are 2 levels down from this. You need to realize that. You know, institutions like that aren't perfect. This is a good place. Now, on the basis of that, what was decided is that what is really needed, and it's an internal, very organic process, to go for an institution that unites the various capacities of such training institutions, and also looking at the context. That means, what are the universities doing? What can they do? How much does it make sense to outsource? And you know, today's state of the art is that in public administration generally, you can only outsource what you don't need to outsource, because if you outsource anything you need to outsource, you can't even come up with terms of references. I mean, that's a general truth. I would say today, there are some people who got their ideas 10 years ago, they still think you can outsource what you don't have, but then you run into knives. Now, the plan to have a prestigious, high-quality new institution and to calibrate what it should do, then is also a process of dialogue, a process of looking around, and a process of tying it closely to the civil service reforms that are actually ongoing. But what does, so this is the stage we are now in, finding what kind of new school of public administration you want. Now, there's 2 things that you can do. The first is some sort of benchmarking. That means you look at international experiences. What's important here is that policy transfers and institutional transfers don't work. We need to come up with something nationally on what the actual thing is. Then also the Lord has many rooms. That means there are various legitimate ways of how to go about this. But you need to look at what you have and how much money you have. There was a cult in public administration about 20, 30 years ago. This is a young crowd, you might not remember it. It was called public management, in which the idea was that you can run institutions by projects. You cannot. For any institution, you need base funding. The government needs to commit to that, and projects can be auxiliary, but you cannot run institutions by projects. And all of these aspects, you need to know that. That means you need a full government commitment. You need to benchmark it against relatively similar institutions in countries that somehow reflect something else. And it is not always the top countries that have the top PA schools. So the best PA schools in Europe are not necessarily the best in other countries. That's very important to see. And then, of course, you need the respective expertise. And here, I really need to commend Deputy Minister Barbara in having assembled a crack team that I find really very impressive by myself, with really people. Generally, it is said, on the other side of the table there's Professor Anneli Temmes, who doesn't like being a Finn, hearing too many positive words about himself. But the Finnish PA training institution, HAUS, is generally regarded in the European discourse to be the best such institution that we have. And especially during her tenure as Director General. So to win her for that and to have this idea of how to do a really successful one is important. However, obviously everybody knows, and Anneli knows it the best, that you can't replicate Finland in Kosova. Yeah? And certainly not Finnish market. As well as certain cultural things. But anyway, so you have a benchmarking against similar institutions that work, and you have a team of people who really know what these institutions should do. To give you a small example here, In-house consultancy is a highly fashionable topic today, and in fact, at the previous European Group of Public Administration in the Francophone system, actually, Kosovo was discussed as an example of should it have, from an intellectual level, a PA training institution that also does in-house consultancy or not. But that you can do, or you cannot do it. Both is possible. So this is a real political decision. Do we want this or not? It's ideology. Whereas a certain level of the kind of training you need in the civil service, that's not a question. If you don't have that, you don't have civil service training institution. If you don't train in civil service, it's kind of obvious. Yeah? You can't have a plumbing firm if you don't do plumbing. So this is the point where it is. From what we've had from the beginning is internal memos that grew and that need to be internal at this case. You cannot reform any of these institutions without meeting people who have a vested interest in older or competing ones, or with consultancy firms who be against it. So if outside PA consultancy firms are against your project, what it means is you're doing a good job. Yeah? And that's also not a question that these institutions want as well. So by that then went up and up, and it was very interesting for me to see this ping-pong game of top international advisors dealing with the draft, and then it going back to the ministry or to the government or the prime minister's office and so on, getting the feedback, what can we do, what will we fund, what do we want to do, and then going back, okay, if this is a political part, then we take this into consideration. Good advisors, as well as good PA people, don't second guess political decisions, but take them on and try to make the best out of it. I think it's also a general wise statement, and one that shouldn't be forgotten, in this country especially. So this is the state where we were, and the last model has been done. Sometimes it's called the AAA project, because the three main people involved in writing it, their first names all begin with an A. So it's a triple alpha people draft, basically, and it's that far that it's being discussed at this point. Once again, discussion means certain things you can calibrate, others you cannot. And once again, also, certain opposition is only what makes sense. So, this is, I think, where we are now. Here I've talked too long. You should have interrupted me, but maybe for the background, this flashes out for those of you not familiar with the process of where we are, and anything else comes back into this amazingly distinguished crowd that whom I'm honored to share this.
Thank you, Wolfgang. It was a brief but very informative presentation, and it's grateful to see the genesis of the School of Public Administration in Kosovo. In order to be able to close the panel on time, we agree that each panelist will answer one question in more detail, and everyone will answer the last question. I ask the panelists respect 10 minutes to answer the question because of the time. Let's start with you, Andrew. Professor Andrew is the founding director of the International School for Government at King's College London. He has worked with British, European, and US policy and politics. His area of research are comparative public policy, public administration, and modernization of government and governance. He has published more than 100 books, papers, chapters, and reports. The first question is, Kosovo has an Institute of Public Administration. So, why establishing a National School of Public Administration? What is the reason for a new institution? Andrew?
Thank you. The question's a good one. I always ask why you're inventing something else, and we've got something here. I think the brief that was given to us when we were looking at this was, how can we improve what is being done? How can we make it coherent and comprehensive and deliver up-to-date training in a modern way that promotes the core principles of good governance. And to do that, one of the things you need to do is to establish a new institution, whether it's a school or a university or whatever you may want. A national school is a good way, because you're signalling something there. A national school brings together all the elements in the way that Wolfgang outlined. And incidentally, always speaking after Wolfgang, you find yourself saying, no, I agree with Wolfgang. But in the way that he described, you need to bring these elements together. And also build into that core elements that make successful public administration courses in schools and directorates successful. And I think one of the lessons there is that you need to build in close links with the public administration sector itself and with government. And I recently finished chairing a review. Well, I finished chairing it in last Christmas, but I finished writing the last report into the Dutch system, with its 9 universities delivering a whole range of exceedingly excellent courses in public administration and public policy. And they're all actually very high quality. I'm not just saying that because we're sitting there in the front row. But they are extraordinarily high quality. And one of the things that makes them high quality is the links they have into the public sector, the departments, the ministries, the local governments, the moralities, and also the private sector that helps to deliver the services. So I think there is a need for a new structure, and I think that it, as much as anything, it signals, it gives a signal, and it allows new approaches. We spoke a bit this morning about the inequalities between men and women, but other groups. And if you have that, then you can build in courses specifically to bring on those groups and have specific training, for example, for people with ability but haven't so far had the opportunity to rise up the corporate ranks. So you can have bespoke courses, you can have general courses, and one of the other things that I found in other countries where these have been successful is that you say to mid-range or junior civil servants, public officials, you have to get this qualification, this certificate, this diploma in order to apply for the next level. And then you need to get another one to go to the next level. So you're constantly training, you build that training into it, and then you build the funding for it from their home departments, or elsewhere, usually from their home departments.
Thank you for the time. Okay, thank you for the answer. And the question 2 is about models of institution. And I invite Anneli to answer. She is licentiate in Administrative Science, former Director General of Public Administration Institution in Finland, and she has advised the creation of Kosova National School of Administration. So, Anneli, could you please tell us about the different models of institution in the world? In your opinion, which model is closer to the needs of Kosova and why?
Okay, thank you very much. So nice to be here again. And if I still may comment to the previous question, I would also like to say that I was present here in Kosova 20 years ago, 2004, when the Institute of Public Administration was developed, and I think that the need for that institute was that time, it was very huge, and we needed, Kosovo needed the institute to very quickly and intensively start training huge numbers of civil servants, and we had that kind of role, and I'm sure that the institute has done very good work for the years. Now the situation is totally different, and the idea of new school is to be something else, to be a real tool for the government. But yes, last time in this conference we discussed a lot about the different models of public administration schools, and we know that there are several numerous models, and it would not be right to say that one model is better than some other. Of course, to find the best, most suitable model for the country depends very much about the society, the public administration, the functions, structures, and cultures of actual public administration. And I think that it's never good to copy anything directly from anywhere, not even from Finland especially. And we in this advisory board have analyzed a lot of different models. We have analyzed schools that maybe have also some academic function, or some schools that are totally concentrating on in-service training of civil servants. We have had schools that have widened their scope, for example, consultancy. Some schools have been totally budget funded, or some has had possibility, or they have been even forced to earn at least part of the income through also consultancy fees. So we have analyzed really several organizations here. And according to our analysis, we saw that the most suitable model for Kosovo would have elements from very different models. Of course, the detailed model of the school will be completed here inside the country, also considering many details that foreign experts never can know. So I think that in the frame model we have proposed, there are elements from different models, I think from every institute represented here, quite much from Brazil also. I think that this is, we have benchmarked models, and it's always good to at least to think about utilizing something that has been successful elsewhere. That's not good here, but let's analyze that. So the best Kosovo model will be done thinking about the Kosovo public administration, society, and culture.
Thank you. If someone wants to add something in an answer, feel free, okay? Mr. Wolfgang, I will return to you and question. The board recommends an interlinked academic structure with 4 academic departments: education, training, research, in concert. What should each of them deliver? There are similar structures in the ministry in charge of public administration. Is there redundance or not? Redundance.
Well, I was talking to my good colleague in Massey before, and the sub-university I met in London for my second professorship, UCL, which is one of the 10 leading universities in the world, at least top 20 in the paper, has 3 MPA programs in parallel. And if you count the additional universities, how many do we get at the University of London? 10, 12? Yeah. So, talk about redundancy. You can get a master's in economics at the University of Cambridge, the same master's in 5 different places. So, redundancy, as long as it has certain effects, that's not my main problem. So, but I don't think this is the case at all. If you like institutions that exist, you don't call it redundancy, you call it synergy, or something like that. I mean, that's just a question of packaging and framing. But what I do think is that institutions of public administration training that mirror the structure of the actual government, that is very beneficial. In fact, it was one of the attempts, if you look at global PA, funny enough, in Buddhist administration, especially in Thailand, traditional Thailand, where we tried to have a map, mental map of reality, and then have this mirrored in the civil service and in the civil service training. That means applying in an almost linear way to conceive of what is happening in society, and then have an answer on the civil service level. So this is actually a very basic, very, very good idea. I do think these 4 areas, columns, emphases, whatever you want to call it. They are, and I think I'm going to like, yeah, very standard. I mean, these are 4 classic areas of what these institutions do. The question is, how much do they do? Are they equal? Do they work synergetically and so on? But just like we classify certain areas in a certain way, so in political science you say, you know, there is international relations, there is governance, there is diplomacy, there is public administration, there is theory. These are the areas of pol sci, and they should be represented by the chair. So is this here. So I don't think there is anything special about that. The choice now is, do you really want to do all of them? And I personally think to try to do all of them, or at least have this in place, is truly more synergetic. Because if you have a high quality place where people can do the actual training, you also can do some form of consultancy. And the idea of in-house consultancy, looking at the havoc, the debt, the misery that was brought by professional consultancy agencies over the world in the last decades, to more in-house consultancy you have, the better. And this is actually the state of the art of thinking. The less you need outside consultancy, the better. And as I mentioned before, even if you then outside consult, you have the capacity to know what the consultancy should be doing because you have the in-house capacity. This is the only controversial thing. The question is how much research you should do, but I do think that anticipatory research, research for which you aren't asked, is behind the strength of most truly successful administrative countries. What makes Singapore the #1 country as far as a lot of administrative capacity is concerned? My answer is anticipatory, unrequired thinking of civil servants, 20 of them, sitting together on round tables and thinking about what is the challenge in 20 years and how do we attend to administrative work. That is a really important thing. So the money you spend on that is marginal, looking at the results you actually get. The 2 training points completely uncontroversial. But how much an institution like that is an institution for the future that also forms a democratic society and gives shelter when the democracy is in danger, I think that that is best shown by your own institution, which was a fortress of sanity and democracy and freedom for key people thinking about the public sector at the time when in the country it was not that easy. Everybody looking at it like that. So I think it's really important to look at this as well, and in this region also, that this is really a place that can build a beneficial legacy well into the future. And so I think if you think about it to, if not maximize these 4 areas in reality, but to at least make it possible to develop into them, and to try to do it as much as you can to your capacity, is beneficial not only for the state, but also for society, not only now, but also for the future. This is how I look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I agree with you. The capacity, internal capacity, is important to maintain the democracy in the bad times. I hope we don't pass for this like us in Brazil. And then I invite Professor Prasojo for answer the other question. Professor, he is Professor of Public Administration at the University of Indonesia. He has experience in administrative reform and had many official positions in government. His research focuses on governance, local democracy, administrative reform, public policies, and public service study. Could the Kosova afford in-house consulting in the immediate start of the school? Do you think it's possible?
In-house consultation. Yeah, I think this is very important subject to discuss. If you are putting the administrative reform in the private governments, you have to build this national scope of organizations. So Indonesia has established these institutes, these schools in 1957, until today. So we have same field, I think, in education, training, research, in-house consultations, and also bidding for the policy analysts. So in sense of in-house consultations, so our institutes, National Institute for Public Administrations, giving the guidance for local governments in improving the quality of public services, the innovation of public services. We have so-called innovation laboratory. So innovation laboratory with the responsibility to enhance and to teach, to facilitate, to encourage local governments in improving public service innovations. So by giving them the cycles of making innovations public services, get together, sense making, defining the roots of problems, finding the solutions for the citizens. And also I think we have launched so-called One Agency, One Innovations. So every year we collected more than 3,000 public service innovations sent to our ministry. So the Ministry of Public Reform coordinate the National Institute for Public Administrations. So through the innovation laboratory, so we collect public service innovations. So until now we have more than 20,300 public service innovation. This is best practices of innovation that initiated and also helped by the National Institute for Public Administrations. So in a scheme of in-house consultations. So I think this is very important, critical and strategic to build these national school of public administrations in Kosovo in order to keep the local governments, ministries, agencies, how to develop and how to make innovations in public services to the citizens. So I think this is the main function, the main role of National Institute for Public Administration. So in-house consultations in public service innovations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. In our school in Brazil, we have lab innovation in government as well. And in our experience, the civil servants the most innovation that we propose are proposed by the civil service, not by the leaders. Because of that, it's very important the new school, listen and open the space for the civil servant talking about their problems and thinking about their solution. So I ask Ms. Anneli if you want to add something to this question about the in-house consult.
I can tell you that I started working in the Finnish civil service training organization as a leadership consultant. And I changed my position from the Ministry of Finance, which is also our Ministry of Public Administration, to training organization to start a new section, consultancy, which was totally new at that time. And also some other colleagues from the ministry came to start working in the consultancy area. And of course we were very eager, very motivated. We wanted to change our organization at once. But I must say that there were also challenges, so quite soon we understood that being a consultant is not the same thing that being a civil servant in the ministry. So even a good civil servant does not turn into a consultant at once. So we needed a lot of training about consultancy skills, attitudes, approaches, and also communicate with the organization, which now is not requirement in the same way as it was possible when you could be advised or even ordered as a representative of the ministry. So a lot of changes, but also what we had to do, we had to train our customers, our ministries and agencies to utilize the internal consultants, because they were a little bit surprised how we can utilize this internal consultant, or how can we get how can we utilize the best expertise. So there was a lot to do, and I think that also the training of consultancy skills could and should start right in the very beginning of the new academy, or even before, if some people have been selected to become consultant. And maybe it's then good to start to activities in practice through some pilot cases, the content of which should not be the most difficult. But it's an interesting area, and of course there are questions.
Thank you. And now I invite Professor Arben to respond to the next question. Professor Arben is rector of the University of Prishtina, where he is also a professor of political science. He is a scientific member of the Austrian Institute for International Affairs. Do you think, Professor, public university could deliver curriculums better and quicker in order to foster the rise of a new generation of qualitative future civil servants?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. The mistake for the second time. I was last year as well here discussing more or less the same issue. I have two short announcements. The first one is that really quarter to 12 I have to leave, and I cannot postpone the second meeting for the second time in 2 hours. The other announcement is that I am going to be short, but I cannot guarantee that I am going to be painless. And reflecting after 1 year what we have done. In this case, I will speak in my capacity as a member of this international board, or maybe as a professor of political science at the University of Prishtina. This is as a new elected rector, which will form in the 1st of October. Last year, I know I was mentioning, giving some quotes about Max Weber and his ideas, classical ideas of how to organize the state and the public administration, and so on and so forth. Professor Wolfgang, the key pillars within the political science studies, and one of them is our ideas. Thinking about public administration and ideas, I would classify 3 types of ideas. The first one, the regressive ideas. The second one, revolutionary ideas. And the third one, the progressive ideas. If you wish, I will make a public statement that I'm a call that don't believe in revolutionary ideas. And I could give 2-hour lectures why it is not wise to believe or to pursue revolutionary ideas. Because, in short, to make a long story short, because it's no guarantee that the coming generation, if we start to abolish everything which exists, will be better than the existing one. This is, somebody might like to identify me in terms of my ideological beliefs, but in this case, I am just trying as a professor of political science to make this statement. And we do not have to forget the era we are living in. We do speak in the agenda about the digital era. People from IT sector and experts on that field, they say, but indeed this era is the past. We have entered the light of this phenomenon, the era of the artificial intelligence. And the key question for me is, what could we learn could we utilize those new opportunities and challenges for the public administration as well. It was mentioned that the importance of evidence-based policy and decision-making, and I can't agree more that this is really very much needed, and not just to offer diagnosis from far away. Kosovo, I think, coming now slowly back to the case study, Kosovo has huge opportunities, and it depends, do we make use of those opportunities or not? And I think that you have in Spanish, if I'm not mistaken, this important say parte bien, or in Batania, in which language. The only, I would say that the only permanent development is the permanent change. And in order to have a successful change, I would like to stress the need to deliberate, to have a dialogue, an open and honest dialogue with all parties involved in those processes. However, I don't think that, okay, of course, we have to think before we do anything, but at some point we should do something. I am saying at the self-critique as well, and to everyone involved in this process, that for my perception, it hasn't been done enough. 1 year has passed, and we are still thinking. At some point, we should do something. And this is really honest, maybe it's not brutally honest, but this is a call to everyone involved in this in this process. Why I was making this statement about 3 types, typologies of ideas, is that somewhere in the agenda is one of the titles, how to build institutions from the scratch. As far as I know, Kosovo has not for decades, better than me, Institute for Public Administration. And I think this is very unlucky choosing term from the scratch. We have just to see how to utilize and how to transform the existing capacities. Of course, should be done much better, and this is the way, but not necessarily to build from the scratch. And the answer is to have that transformation. We have a saying in Albanian, it's much easier to create, to establish something than to maintain. And my experience now, 20 years, since 2004, as a professor at the University of Prishtina, political science, and we have programs in public administration and business and so on and so forth. Too many institutions, and it was necessary to create. But some of them should be maybe a better way. And I think that the idea is to try to focus on maintaining and reforming, to have that transformation, and not necessarily to say, well, we are going to create and it's going to start with me. And the final statement I'd like to make is, of course, the public universities are able, they should be able to deliver the curriculum and to help to strengthen this, what I call, coming from the German culture of universities, this Humboldt triangle. Why are the universities, what is the justification to pay, to maintain them? That they should provide for the needs of society and the state in addition to the needs of the economy. The clear answer is yes. Of course, we could just think what could we do better in order to have a more efficient and efficacious public administration in the era we are living in the era of artificial intelligence. Thank you so much. And I do apologize when I leave at 11:45. I have to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the answer. Someone want to add? No? So now I invite Professor Michiel to answer the next question. question. He is full professor in public administration in the Netherlands. He is also a professor at Betania and at South Africa. He is a doctor honoris causa in public economics since 2016 in the Massey University of Rome. So the question is, many things are about the public budget available to invest, right? That's the best insight to provide the academic requirements for serving public administration. Don't you think the choice is less financial than political and philosophical? And depends on the level of the ambition that the leaders have for the state.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Well, this question is a very difficult question. You have to consider what is the ultimate goal of this national school. And I think it is about citizens. Citizens wanting to trust a public sector. A public sector that is capable of addressing major societal issues. And as a public sector that takes the interests of the citizens into account and making those decisions. And from an international perspective, you have to create a merit system in the public administration. That's the one. Public sector composed of officials who are dedicated to the public interest, professional, skilled in their duties, have the right attitude. Maybe that's the most important thing, have the right attitude. And, people have to feel that they are heard. It's not just about public sector. You have to see it in the context of society, of politics, of business, of sociology, of history. And that people want to be heard and want to have their problems solved by the public sector. And everything that helps in that is welcome. And what it is, I see here in Kosovo, I see the National School of Public Administration as a means to accomplish that. But together with all the laws that have been adopted in the past few years, on the assessment system for civil servants, and the amendment of the law on public officials, I think all is together in trying to improve the capacity of the public service. And what I'm especially pleased about is that here in Kosovo, there's not just state international standards which says what are the problems here in Kosovo and how can we address them best, and what should be the goals again. It's the specific context of Kosovo. And then, you ask me how it should be done? I don't think so. I really don't think so. I'm very skeptical about everything. Public sector reform on everything. They often fail. And most public servants get reform fatigue. Not again, not anymore. So it's different. And I hear people here praising the Netherlands for education, for courses. And for 6 years now, I have students make that evaluation on public policies, on local level, on the regional level, national level. Find 3 or 4 evaluations and find out if those policies were effective and efficient. And of those 600, maybe 10 or 12 were indeed effective or efficient. So I'm very skeptical about the Netherlands. They have the National School of Public Administration. In that case, it's not so much the knowledge, but it's the reflection and coming together and creation of an attitude that's most important. But who am I to advise Kosovo? My own government thinks I'm a pain in the ass. Why? Because I don't advise them, I ask them nasty questions. About side effects, about unanticipated consequences. And I say, you want to prioritize that? do you please consider that you can neglect that? And then they say, are you opposing my plans? I said, no, I'm not opposing your plan. I'm just asking you to make thoughtful, decent decisions, taking also those side effects into account. That's it, and that's what I'm doing here also. You want this, Excellency? Fine. Did you consider that this and this and this might be a side effect of Excellency? And could you please mitigate that? That's not. So I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, really. I'm just asking you ask questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Marco de Vries. The question is the best answer, no? So, we are coming to the last question of our panel. This question is for everyone in this panel. So, we all have experience reforming the public administration in our countries. I suppose this experience has motivated the proposed model of Kosovo National School. Could you share with us an experience that shows the need of investing properly and sustainably in human resource for the public administration? So you can choose the order to answer this question. The order that you are sitting, it's okay.
Yeah, if it's the order we are sitting in, I have the best seat time because I voted to go and I'm the first in the line. Yeah, so I've been involved in several civil service reforms and institutional reforms like that, Germany, Estonia, but also a couple of other countries, which did ask me, and contrary to Michael, I'm very happy not just to ask questions, but also to provide provisional answers. But I would always say, as I said before, if something has been legitimately democratically decided, I don't go back when I wear the consultancy hat and second guess that. So that's to Arben's point about going back to a political decision that hasn't been made long ago to start the school and say, no, we should have upgraded the other. That's a battle pass, that ship is there. Yeah, so for me, that's not a question. And one thing you can really tell from the German experience, it only makes sense to upgrade what you have is what you have as substance and prestige. If something has no substance and no prestige, that means if civil servants say this school to go to this is embarrassing because they don't know how to train us, there is very little value in using this to go up. So that we saw the power of history, we saw very much in the biggest of these transfer measures in which I have been involved, and that is the reform of higher education, including civil service and civil service training, when East Germany joined West Germany. What's called reunification, but on an administrative level it really was joining. And in this case, you saw how prestigious history helps, but non-prestigious history is actually a reason to abolish. So this is how this was done. Universities with a recent past that haven't delivered particularly well have been closed, whereas those who have a more ancient history, usually 19th century, have been maintained. And sometimes it was even impossible for politicians to close institutions by saying, well, but already Napoleon tried to close and it didn't work, and so how can you do this now? Yeah? The institution in the city in which Weber was born, which is why I was there in Erfurt, which had to be maintained for historical reasons that nobody actually wanted because it was well beyond the capacities to do so, but there was no other political choice. I would say that one of the big, to go back to the political theory thing, there are two distinctive traditions in Europe, and that is whether freedom comes through the state or against the state. That freedom is defined by having a space of liberty against the state, or whether freedom also against the others, against economic forces, against violence, and so on. That's the Aristotelian sense comes through this. If you more or less go for the second institution, which is the Aristotelian legacy, which is the Kantian legacy, and so on and so on, then there is no alternative to high capacity. So the alternative to bad public administration is not less administration, but good administration. If that is the case, you need to have institutions that create that, as well as a culture and a society that supports that. So this is how I would finish these questions. I was a little bit pontificating in the end about more general things, but I hope that was worth it. Thank you so much.
Based on our experience in Indonesia, we have 4.3 million civil servants, excluding police and military services. So I think bigger than population in Kosovo. So managing public administration in very high complexity. So our National Institute for Public Administration is now getting 67 years old. So I think human and investment is very important in the public administration in order to create better public service innovation to citizens, to solve the problem of citizens. Yeah. So our National Institute has responsibility to educate not only the competencies of new public servants, but also the culture of new public servants. But also to train the top leaders in the bureaucracy, including also top leaders in the police and military leagues. So in the top leaders training, they have to create so-called change projects management. So to create innovations in the governments and also in the public services. I think it is very important. So that's why we need these institutions in order to support the ideas of public sector reform, public reforms, and so on. And now our institute is now becoming also think tank of the governments in the strategic issue, for example, digital governance, multilateral governance, and so on. So this is very significant because this institute has to train more than 4.3 million civil servants in Indonesia. In the beginning, when the junior civil servants enter in the bureaucracy, but also to create standard of training in the specific area. So this is very important. I think not only in the education training, but also in the research to cope with the strategic issue facing by the governments. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Maybe as a final thought before I leave, I believe that the solution is in some proposals, which all of them start with the letter B. We need maybe not necessarily to make the mistakes of many Western states and societies to over-regulate. Maybe we need to deregulate. To have simple and clear and straightforward regulations. And not to come at some point, everything is over-regulated, and we know that coming from social sciences, it's no context in the world which could regulate every possible situation in a given situation, in a given development. And for the countries like Kosovo, which are small countries, and somehow everyone knows everyone, I think it's very important to have the tools in place to have a public administration to depersonalize it. And to do so, I think it's digitalization very much needed. At some offices, in public offices, in public administration in Kosovo, just because he or she doesn't like the person X or Y, maybe his request will stay on the table for 6 months. And if we manage to have a digital process, we can track it and make it conditional. Let's say in 7 working days you have to proceed that to approve or to disapprove the following procedure. And the last one, it's maybe in this case thinking about the cliches about the German system, which is known for too much regulation. I would say we have to be careful with too much regulation, to have better regulation, but we have just to open the door and the windows for the approach of the cliche of German discipline, which is very much needed. And I think those Ds might offer some solution for the recent state of play of the public administration in Kosovo. Thank you.
The question was asking about HR training. I'm going to try and keep to that. Of course, HR is a very wide field, and I'm going to link it to 3 points: co-creation, co-delivery, and the primacy of politics. And we've been talking on this panel, and as you know, for several months, a year, previously to how to restructure public administration training and all the elements of it in Kosovo. And one of the things that I'd be keen to emphasise is not to create another institution that is insular, create another island, so it has to be open to universities here in Kosovo, but also in the world. It has to be open to other experiences, so you bring the best of those experiences. And where co-creation comes in, we're going to assume that most of the people going through this new institution, this new school, are already graduates, so it's postgraduate training. And go out to the administrative units, whether it's mayors or departments, and say, look, what do you need? Which is quite some mayor, you sit down occasionally and just Singapore, we know they do this, and just think about what do we really need, what are the problems facing us? And then look at where the expertise is for that. A lot of it will be in those departments. So you bring those departments to the college, and you work with the academics to look at how you can structure courses to address those problems that sometimes won't even be problems, but quite often will be, and they're going to get worse. We know in certain cases. So you co-create diplomas, postgraduate degrees, courses that are aimed to bring in the expertise that is within academia. Certainly, bring in people from the, they're very expensive. You wouldn't bring in one from the Harvard School of Government, possibly someone a bit cheaper. But you can bring them in to help you deliver those courses. Alongside, and this is where co-delivery comes in, alongside experienced public servants. The experience of delivery is often a painful one. And Michael talked about civil servants who get to reform fatigue. You can address that by looking at what works, how it works, and how you've got the evidence to show that it works, by not having a top-down approach, by building it up in a co-creation, co-delivery way. One of the mistakes the UK has made, and I would always caution against this, well, I made lots of mistakes, but one of them is to separate policy from delivery. I think you need to recognise that you can't have good delivery unless you also understand how to make the policy and vice versa. The two are absolutely interconnected. And so you need to make sure that those are some of those things you teach. Some of those things you bring in people with experience. Some things you can't teach. You just have to actually go out and work in the field. I don't mean as a peasant. We're not Maoists. Go out and work in a delivery unit, seeing what are the problems of the people and communities who are seeking to deal with. Then you actually have a much better idea about how to forge new policies, but also new courses. And that's where I come on to the primacy of politics. I was many years ago with Sir Lemos Prime Minister, working with a senior member of the Department of Health, putting together some things. And the data the evidence-based policy was the order of the day. Then. The evidence said that this policy wasn't going to work, and why are we doing it? To which the civil servant said to me, just do it. Just do it. Tony's done a deal with a particular minister, and part of the deal is she wants this policy. I said, it's not going to work. He said, we all know it's not going to work, but that's politics.
So we in Finland at that time had very big economic crisis. So this intensive training concerned whole state administration, and I dare to say that when the country then joined EU, our state level civil servants were all very ready to take the new responsibilities in the EU working groups and in negotiations with European colleagues. And also, what we consider important in the Ministry of Finance, they were ready to get some of the membership fee back to different EU programs. And we also got, as a country, we got good reputation as a newcomer of the European family, that our civil servants working there were quite professional and they had been trained. So this is my example.
Well, what should I add? You know, so many wise things have been said.
I just want to add with the digitalization that the actor that left mentioned. I think we are entering really a completely new phase. I just read the book of Harari, Nexus, and it makes me think. Every book makes me think, but this book especially makes me think. There is a probability that in the very near future we're going to see that artificial intelligence is human also. And that we just take for granted what it tells us to do and what it tells us that the answers are and that the problems are. And that is really dangerous. And that is why decision making, real decision, how do you make decisions? How do you arrive at your decisions? What information do you use? Can you trust that information? Can't you trust that information? Is that disinformation? That's so very important for the future public officials, I think. Because it will change our lives. Even in Holland, we now see that policymakers develop policies with the help of artificial intelligence and other municipalities and government. And that's really dangerous because it's all from one general, non-context bound, no problem bound idea of that internet that says this is the optimal way to solve the asylum crisis. This is the optimal way. Then ask ChatGPT and it gives you the answers and please be careful. Please reflect on that and please and then also need to do in that digitalization process to get used to it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Professor Wolfgang wants to tell a little word.
And what I want to say, I don't want to go into the last minutes for the question, but especially for these things, may I invite everybody who is here now in this audience tomorrow, the second day, to the opening plenary like this. So this will be not that brilliantly chaired as by Betania because I chair it, and it's the statesman's panel. That means it's those people in this audience who have not only had practical experience as senior civil servants, but really as policymakers shaping administrative policy and to deal with the policy process. And of course, one of the things we will address is one of the key questions right now in digitalization, namely, does digital transformation create a better public sector, or does it in fact rather require it to come into existence to begin with? So, if this is an exciting question for you, and if anything like that, to listen to former and present prime ministers, university association presidents, deputy ministers, vice ministers of public administration of huge countries, and so on and so on, please be in the same place tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you. Thanks.
Professor. And we have a few minutes, so I have to answer the audience if you have questions. There.
Hello, I'm Anneli from the University of Technology in Finland. Actually, I did part of my PhD in Finland, and I was that period when we entered European Union, and then everything went very much for digitalization and everything. And my question is related to digitalization. As we know, it gives a lot of potential, but it also fuels a lot of crime, like corruption and fake news. And so, what are the side effects of and how we can cope with public administration? So, with the side effects and how we can prevent them.
I think you can collect one or two more questions, someone more. There.
Thank you. Really interesting discussion around national schools of government, and it's interesting to note that in the UK we had one, and then it was closed in 2012. And so it would be quite interesting to kind of understand the full life cycle. Something that had its roots in 1970 survived in various guises until 2012, and then a particular political decision taken to deconstruct it and put in place an alternative that was at that point considered more meeting particular needs. So, and there is a select committee recording of the kind of trying to understand what happened, where evidence was given around some of that. I just think it would be really interesting to step back and understand, almost like an end-to-end, the sort of life and death of a national school as a way of then saying, what can we take from that? And what was interesting at the very time that the British members put to bed, other countries were just about setting up theirs, like South Africa and elsewhere. So it's just to say, I think a kind of slightly broader understanding of what happened would be helpful. And then back to the questions that many of the panelists have raised, is this really a better way of building capability of public servants, and what makes it better? And linking that to limited resources, therefore, what level of resourcing is required for it to do what it's set up to do. So, it's not a question, a comment. Thank you.
One more?
I have a question for the panelists. I'm Radboud from HAUS. I would like to know the research behind the proposal for your solution. Was there any diagnostic research regarding the Kosovo Institute of Public Administration, and also the overall, let's say, higher education sector or other training sector that was considered, and if that research is public, so that we can understand how you came up with the proposal. The second question, if I may, I was very intrigued by Andrew, because he mentioned a model where, I don't know if I'm right, it was Netherlands or somewhere else, where the Institute of Public Administration or the training organization had a very excellent links with the government, the universities, and the private sector. Can you just explain what kind of links and how that model worked out? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Who wants to start?
A couple of them in my direction. I'll do my best. First question, unintended consequences. There are always unintended consequences, which is why there's such a shock when they occur. Which I thought of that. You can't build them out because, I'll give you an example. I was discussing this with Wolfgang yesterday. We work at King's with some very good medical schools, and one of the oncology professors was telling me that they're using robots now, which is artificial intelligence, to do a lot of treatments, and a robot can do many, many times more surgeries than he can. The problem is hallucinating robots. Every few in 1,000 operations, the software goes wrong, and the robot thinks it's seeing a problem where there isn't one, and that can have very harmful consequences. And they don't know why it's happening. That's just one example. I'm not sure you're going to get hallucinating artificial intelligence in a Department of Work and Pensions, but the effects can still be very harmful. So there are unintended consequences, but we just have to plan to build into our capacity to deal with when it happens. National School of Government in the United Kingdom began as a civil service college after the Fulton Report in 1968. And it was recommended to be the University of the Civil Service. It was meant to have its own research capacity and have a Vice-Chancellor and run as an independent public sector university. Didn't happen because it was too expensive. And all the things that were supposed to happen with civil servants being given regular leave to attend, to have a fast stream in particular, bright young things brought in from university to go to university, to go to the civil service. The departments, constantly fighting budgets, would not release people for enough time, and they couldn't then recruit a research entity, and it was run by civil servants, not by academics, which was not the intention. And it didn't do it, so they turned the title into the National School of Government. It earned the lasting enmity of some Conservative ministers, which is a long story I won't go into, and when the last Conservative government was re-elected, it was doomed. Now, the new government, and some members of the last one, and all the senior civil servants in the UK say, wouldn't it be good if we had a UK National School of Government? So watch this space. What was the third question? Oh, the research behind, yes. Well, I came in slightly after it had been decided to do this, so I'll hand it over to my colleagues.
Okay, so I would say, from my experience, that the PIPA evaluation was the usual standards, from site visits to document analysis, to budget, to interview, and especially talking to stakeholders, which is very important. That means you ask current possible civil servants how much do you like PIPA and how much not. Is it prestigious to go? Do they do it? But it was not that difficult to do because, as you know, the staff is not small. And because it's a tiny unit that more coordinates and delivers, this is easy to be done. But the standard for public, I would say you have to come to ministry because there are different standards to the evaluation of academic units with semi or full autonomy and agencies of the ministry, not cooperative institutions, which you have in this case, of course. So, you know, inner organizations under ministries can be evaluated by ministries and states. That's the general one. Now, to Egler's point on the digitalization, of course, this is a really important thing, but I think it emphasizes the training. In Estonia, if I may use my Estonian background here, at some point we thought that digitalization needs to more positivity. That means that you throw iPads at the innocent, you have an increase in democracy and in transparency and anti-corruption. And since about a decade, we know that what digital government does is to emphasize the vectors you already have. Meaning that it doesn't change, but it emphasizes. Meaning that if you have corrupt government, digitalization will not make it less, but more corrupt. Let's remember who came up with the initiative in the OECD to promote digital voting. Do you know who came up with the idea of universal digital voting? It was Vladimir Putin. And his idea was not to get more democracy, but to get for a certain kind of people to get their results faster. If you have open government, digital voting will be more transparent. If you have a closed one, then the boss says, oh, today I 97.5%, no, 97.7% sounds good today, and then you get it, because almost nobody understands this. Usually in the country, 5 or 10 people really know how digital works on a technical level, right? They know the code for various reasons. That means you need to trust them. If you can't trust them in a system that's untrustworthy, that's not the case. Because of that, a highly trustworthy civil service, a strong civil society that supports this kind of thing, and general technical capabilities for oversight are important. Once again, that is part of the digital mandate of such training institutions that we are talking about, not only how to use digitality, but also how to monitor it and to be sure that it's used in the general public interest. Thank you.
Someone more? No? So, we finish. I want to thank you, the panelists here, for sharing your knowledge, and I want to thank you, the audience, for listening us. Thank you.